Everyone in the workplace, from the employer to the newest worker, has different but important duties to keep the workplace safe. Because the employers have the most authority in the workplace, they have the greatest responsibility, but it's important for your own safety that you understand everyone's health and safety duties, including your own. Preventing injuries and illness at work starts here, with the things you learn in this tutorial, but it doesn't end here. One of your employer's duties under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, OSHA, is to give you specific information and instructions on how to stay safe on your job. What you learn from this program will help you start to understand those instructions. We hope you use what you learn here every day of your working life. The Occupational Health and Safety Act, OHSA, is a set of laws that spells out the duties of employers, supervisors, and the rights and duties of workers. There are also different regulations that are attached to the Occupational Health and Safety Act. They contain more detailed laws about how to make the workplace safe in specific situations. For example, several regulations explain what is needed to work safely with chemicals and other hazardous materials. This includes training, warning labels on products, and information sheets. There are also regulations for different types of workplaces, such as construction projects, healthcare facilities, industrial establishments, and mines. The whole point of the Occupational Health and Safety Act and the regulations is to keep the workers from getting hurt or sick on the job. There are inspectors from the Ministry of Labor who make sure the laws are followed and may issue orders or lay charges if they aren't. If a person is convicted of breaking a law, there are penalties such as fines or time in prison. The Occupational Health and Safety Act gives everyone in the workplace duties. These duties are connected to the level of authority each person has in the workplace. To sort out all the duties in the workplace, the Occupational Health and Safety Act breaks them down to three main levels of authority. 1. The employer, who is in charge of everyone. 2. The supervisor, manager. 3. The worker, you. Here are some of the things the OHSA says every employer has to do as part of their job. 1. Make sure workers know about hazards and dangers in the workplace and how to work safely. 2. Make sure every supervisor knows how to take care of health and safety on the job. 3. Create health and safety policies and procedures for the workplace. 4. Make sure everyone knows and follows the health and safety procedures. 5. Make sure workers wear the right protective equipment. 6. Do everything reasonable to keep workers from getting hurt or sick on the job. Here are some of the things the OHSA says every supervisor has to do as part of their job. 1. Tell workers about the hazards and dangers in the workplace and show them how to work safely. 2. Make sure workers follow the law and the workplace health and safety policies and procedures. 3. Make sure workers wear and use the right protective equipment. 4. Do everything reasonable to keep workers from getting hurt or sick on the job. Now here are some of the things the OHSA says every worker has to do as part of their job. 1. Follow the law and the workplace health and safety policies and procedures. 2. Always wear or use protective equipment that the employer requires. 3. Work and act in a way that won't hurt them or any other worker. 4. Report any hazard they find in the workplace to their supervisor. Your employer has a responsibility to make the workplace as safe as possible and to tell you about any hazards in the work you do. Your supervisor has the same duty. They also have to make sure you know how to avoid those dangers and work safely. You have the right under the OHSA to be told about hazards in the work you do and to be instructed on how to do your work safely. If someone asks you to do work that you don't know enough about, your employer and supervisor are responsible for making sure you know how to do the work safely. That's why you have the right to speak up and ask questions, even if you're shy or unsure. People can get hurt on the job if they don't have the right information and training. You should never have to be worried that you'll get in trouble for asking questions or reporting a problem. It's against the law for your employer or supervisor to punish you in any way for doing what the OHSA says or for asking your employer or supervisor to do what the OHSA expects them to do. This is called a reprisal. It's even against the law for your supervisor or employer to threaten to punish or fire you for doing these things. You also have the right to refuse unsafe work if you have reason to believe it puts you or a fellow worker in danger. Some people say what you don't know can't hurt you. That's not true at work. On some jobs, what you don't know can kill you. A hazard is anything in the workplace that could hurt you or the people you work with. All of us have heard about a worker or a group of workers who were killed on the job. We've heard of workers falling from heights, getting caught in equipment, or being electrocuted and burned. Events like these send shockwaves through the workplace, the community, and is a tragic loss for the victim's family and friends. Unfortunately, this kind of event not only happens once or twice, but dozens of times each year in Ontario. There is a hazard at the root of every work-related death, injury, or sickness. A hazard can take many forms. Sometimes more than one hazard can combine to make an even bigger hazard. You need to know about hazards in your workplace before you start working. Here are some of the most common hazards in Ontario workplaces. 1. Repeating same movements over and over, especially if you're in an awkward position or you use a lot of force. Think of someone who bends down all day or someone who lifts heavy things over and over, especially above the shoulders or below the knees. 2. Slipping, tripping, or falling. Think of something as simple as spilled coffee on the floor, a cluttered work area, or a raised platform with no guardrails. 3. Working near motorized vehicles. Think of being hit by a dump truck that is backing up on a construction site, or someone getting hit by a forklift truck in a warehouse or on a loading dock. 4. Using or working near machinery. Over the years, many workers have been killed or seriously injured by the equipment they operated. 5. Workplace violence. It can happen in many workplaces, such as to a gas station attendant working alone, or to a healthcare worker or home care worker in those settings. You also need to think about less visible hazards related to your work. Things like chemicals, fumes, and toxic dust. Some of these hazards can make you very sick. Sometimes they make you sick right away. Other times you don't know that you're sick until months or even years later. That's why it's important to know about these hazards now. It's the employer's duty to make sure supervisors know enough and have enough experience and training to keep workers safe and healthy while they work. It's the employer and supervisor's duty to inform workers of health and safety hazards. It's the worker's duty to report hazards that they know of to their supervisor or employer as soon as possible so that they can fix it. Employers, supervisors, and workers work together to make the workplace safer. Here are 4 important questions about your job that you need to know answers to. If you don't know, ask your supervisor. What are the hazards of this job? Is there any special training needing for this job? Do I have the right protective equipment for this job? If I have any questions about safety, who do I ask? There are many ways that your employer can protect you from workplace hazards. The best way is to get rid of or eliminate the hazard completely. A good example is replacing a toxic cleaning chemical with one that is non-toxic. If the hazard can't be eliminated, your employer can try and reduce the hazard. This can be done by reducing how much of the hazard you're exposed to. An example of this is turning up the ventilation system in a factory or putting a barrier around a dangerous piece of equipment. These are called engineering controls. Another way to reduce hazards is to reduce how long or how often you come in contact with the hazard. This can be done by arranging work differently so that you're not exposed so long. These are called administrative or work practice controls. If the hazard still exists after trying to control it through elimination, engineering controls, and administrative or work controls, your employer may require you to use protective equipment and/or protective devices. The Ontario Health and Safety Act says that one of your duties as a worker is always to wear or use the protective equipment that your employer requires. You may think that a hard hat, safety glasses, steel-toe boots, or some other protective clothing or equipment are uncomfortable, or they slow you down. But if the Ontario Health and Safety Act or employer says you have to wear or use these things to do the work, you have to. Some of the machinery in your workplace may have a guard. The guard protects you from coming in contact with a moving part. If your employer or one of the Ontario Health and Safety regulations says the guard has to be used, it has to be used. The Ontario Health and Safety Act says that you must never remove or disable any protective device that is required. If the device has to come off for any reason, you should not use the equipment without a replacement device. Taking shortcuts by removing guards is unsafe, and it's against the law. The Ontario Health and Safety Act says you have to make sure you don't use any equipment or any machinery in any way that could hurt you or another worker. You also can't act or behave in any way that could hurt you or someone else. That means no playing games, pranks, or acting in other ways that could hurt someone. There are other ways you can find about hazards in the workplace. Your employer may have some of the workplace health and safety procedures in writing. These are procedures about the work you do, the machines and equipment you use. Your employer has to make sure you know how and understand them when you start work. Your employer is also responsible for making sure the procedures are followed by everyone. The law states every worker has to have information and training about chemicals or hazardous materials in the workplace. The Workplace Hazardous Materials Information System, otherwise known as Whmis, says you need to receive information and instruction on how to use, store, and get rid of hazardous materials safely. This information is available on warning labels and information sheets. If your job involves using equipment, your employer and supervisor must instruct you on how to use that equipment safely. One way is to get information on the safe use of machinery is from the operator's manual. It tells you about hazards and has instructions on how to use the equipment safely. Your employer should make sure everyone can check the manual if they need information. If there's no manual available for the equipment you're using, you should ask your supervisor for information on how to operate the equipment safely. Another important way you can learn about hazards in the workplace is through training. Sometimes your employer will give you training at your workplace. Sometimes you'll be sent elsewhere for training. Your employer also has to tell you how and where to get first aid and what to do in an emergency. In a safe, healthy workplace, everyone knows about hazards. If you see a hazard on a job or a close call, report it to your supervisor or employer right away. That way, someone who knows how to fix it can deal with it so that no one else gets hurt. Prevention starts here, when everyone knows the hazards. Understanding the Occupational Health and Safety Act is all about knowing the health and safety duties of employers, supervisors, and the rights and duties of workers, and putting them into action. We all have to get involved. If an employer knows about a hazard and doesn't try to eliminate or reduce it, or make sure workers are told about it and how to deal with it, that employer is not doing what the law requires. If a supervisor knows about a hazard and doesn't explain to the workers on how to deal with it, that supervisor is not doing what the law requires. If a worker knows about a hazard and doesn't report it to the supervisor or employer, that worker is not doing what the law requires. If you see a hazard on the job, you have a duty to speak up. This includes reporting equipment that isn't working right or any other hazards that may be present as a result of not following the Occupational Health and Safety Act or its regulations. It's important that you report to your supervisor or employer any injury, incident, or close call so that they can prevent those things from happening again in the future. The Ontario Health and Safety Act gives you the right to participate and get involved in keeping your workplace safe and healthy. There are many ways you can do this. Here are 4 good ways to get involved in keeping your workplace safe, but there are many more. 1. You can ask questions when you're not sure about something. 2. You can volunteer to become a worker health and safety representative or a worker member of the Joint Health and Safety Committee. 3. You can help your health and safety representative or Joint Health and Safety Committee with health and safety inspections by pointing out possible hazards in your work area. 4. You can take your health and safety training seriously and put what you learn into practice on your job. The Ontario Health and Safety Act says that workplaces with 6 to 19 workers need to have a health and safety representative or a joint health and safety committee. In most larger workplaces with 20 or more workers, the Act says a joint health and safety committee has to be set up. Committees have to have at least 2 people on them. The workers or the union, if there is a union, pick one of them, and the employer picks the other. In workplaces where there are 50 or more workers, the committee must have at least 4 members, and at least half the members have to represent the workers. The committee plays an important role in helping keep the workplace safe. For example, a member of the committee who represents the workers must regularly inspect the workplace. Information from these inspections is brought back to the committee. The committee then makes recommendations to the employer to improve the health and safety. The employer has to respond to these recommendations within a short period of time. Because there is an employer and a worker member on the committee, everyone has a say in identifying and solving problems. In smaller workplaces, the health and safety representative has many of the same roles as the committee. They help to improve the health and safety at work. They do this by inspecting the workplace often. If they find a problem, they make recommendations to the employer about how to fix it. The Ontario Health and Safety Act says your employer must post the Act and other health and safety information in your workplace, such as an occupational health and safety poster. Look for the posted names of your health and safety representative or your joint health and safety committee members. These are people you can talk to if you need help. And if your workplace has more than 5 workers, your employer has to post the company health and safety policy. If you can't find any of this information in your workplace, talk to your supervisor about it. Health and safety is an important part of his or her job. You can also talk to people you work with and benefit from each other's experience. Always be on the lookout for hazards to yourself or others. Before you start work each day, ask yourself questions like, is there any machinery broken? Are there any warning labels or signs? Is there any moving equipment that I could get caught in? Is there something that I could slip or trip on? Do I need protective equipment? Do I know how to do the job safely? Is there any other worker nearby that could get hurt by what I'm doing? Is this task more than I can physically handle? These are good questions for everyone in the workplace to ask. Prevention starts here, by paying attention to details and following the Act and workplace health and safety procedures. It is a sad fact that in some workplaces, nobody pays much attention to safety. In those workplaces, it's all about doing the work as quickly as possible. But if someone questions the way things are being done, they may get a dirty look, but nothing is done to make things safer. People in workplaces like that are often afraid to do anything about it because they don't want to get fired, so they keep quiet. Maybe you felt that way in a past job. That's why it's important to know that you're not alone. Help is always available from outside the workplace. If you see something unsafe that could hurt someone, you need to report it to your supervisor or your employer. It's also a good idea to tell your health and safety representative or committee if there is one. But if the employer or supervisor doesn't fix the problem, you can call the Ministry of Labor. The ministry's job is to prevent workplace injuries and illnesses through enforcing the Occupational Health and Safety Act. They want to know if there are problems that aren't being fixed. Ministry of Labor inspectors can't be in all workplaces at all times. but the ministry wants to hear if there's a problem on the job that can't be fixed anywhere in Ontario. So it has a toll-free number that you can call. Calling that number connects you to a health and safety contact center that takes calls 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If you don't want to give your name when you call the health and safety contact center, you don't have to. Here's the number: 1-877-202-0008. Remember we mentioned reprisals before? It's against the law for your employer or supervisor to fire or punish you for doing what the Ontario Health and Safety Act expects you to do, or because you ask them to do what the Ontario Health and Safety Act expects them to do. It's even against the law for your employer or supervisor to threaten to fire or punish you for these things. The Ontario Health and Safety Act is very clear on this. If you feel that your employer is taking action against you for raising a health and safety concern, you can discuss it with the union official if you're a member of the union, or you can bring the complaint to the Ontario Labour Relations Board. If you're not sure what to do, you can call the ministry's toll-free number for information. The Office of the Worker Advisor also provides free advice and representation to non-unionized workers who are in this situation. You can call their toll-free number for help at 1-855-659-7744. If you have the reason to believe that the work you are doing or the equipment you're using may hurt you or someone else, you can refuse to do that work. This means you tell your employer or supervisor and your health and safety representative committee that you think you're in danger and you're not going to do the work. You need to tell them why. All workers have the right to refuse work if they have reason to believe it's dangerous. It's important to know that you can also refuse work if you have reason to believe the area you're working in is likely to endanger you or another worker, or that you're in danger from workplace violence. You must report the situation to your supervisor or employer and should also contact your health and safety representative or committee. Most of the time, your supervisor or employer and your health and safety representative or committee member will be able to solve the problem. If the problem isn't fixed, or you have reason to believe the work is still unsafe, you can continue to refuse the work. A Ministry of Labour inspector will be then called in to investigate. Some workers, such as nurses, firefighters, and police officers, cannot refuse work if danger is the normal part of their job, or if refusing work would put someone else in danger. Talk to your union, other workplace representatives, supervisor, or employer if you think your right to refuse work may be limited by the work you do. Ontario has a health and safety system which includes the following partners: Ministry of Labour. They develop, communicate, and enforce occupational health and safety requirements and employment standards. They develop, coordinate, implement procedures and strategies to prevent workplace injuries and illnesses, and can set standards for health and safety training. Workers' Health and Safety Center, an occupational health and safety training center for workers, representatives, and employers. Occupational health clinics for Ontario workers. 6 medical clinics located across Ontario that provide occupational health services. Health and Safety Ontario. 4 health and safety associations that provide sector-specific consulting, training, products, and services. There is the Infrastructure Health and Safety Association, serves electrical, construction, transportation sectors. Public Services Health and Safety Association, serves health, education, and municipal sectors. Workplace Safety North, serving mining, pulp and paper, and forestry sectors. Workplace Safety and Prevention Services, services industrial, farming, and service sectors. Workplace Safety and Insurance Board, otherwise known as the WSIB. They administrate Ontario's no-fault workplace insurance for employers and their workers. The system is there to serve everyone in the workplace: employers, supervisors, and workers. Now that you've completed this general awareness program, you're ready to be given more specific information and instruction by your employer and supervisor as required by the Ontario Health and Safety Act. You should hear about specific hazards in your workplace, the procedure to follow when reporting health and safety concerns, incidents, or injuries, any protective equipment that you're required to wear or use, where the company's health and safety policy is posted, where the first aid station is and the names of qualified first aid providers, the company's emergency plan, information on hazardous materials in your workplace, the workplace violence and harassment prevention policy, a copy where the Ontario Health and Safety Act is posted, where the names of your Joint Health and Safety Committee members are posted. Remember, when it comes to your health and safety, there's no such thing as a silly question. That question could save your life, so ask it. In review, all employees have a vital role to play in health and safety. All employees have 3 fundamental rights: the right to participate, the right to know, the right to refuse. Be a safety role model. Most workers should be able to look at their supervisors as good health and safety role models. But others may be looking to you as a role model for good health and safety practices. How you work, the way you think and talk about work, can affect the safety of the people around you. The message you want others to get from you is, prevention starts here.